Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Screen Club. My name is Sarah Naraki. I'm the director of Wealthy Theater, and I am joined by two very wonderful people. Welcome, Caleb and Virginia. How you guys doing?
Sweet.
Oh,
So, as you probably guessed, today we are going to be talking about the Netflix series, The Queen's Gambit. And for anyone who's joining us for the first time for one of these chats, we do this ideally as like a book club style discussion that you've watched the show or the movie ahead of time, because we are going to spoil it like crazy, and we encourage everybody to chime in the chat feature, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. You can comment and let us know what you think about the topic we're talking about. Do you have any questions, anything like that? Otherwise, you can just sit back and listen to the three of us chat about TV. How fun is that?
we have a lot of feelings about TV, so
Oh, yeah.
Buckle
up. Buckle up, buckaroo. If you want to stay up to date on events that we have going on, feel free to follow us on Facebook. Either you can follow Wealthy Theater, where we have all these events listed too, or at CinemaLabGR, and they are the same handles for Instagram as well. If you have any recommendations for shows or movies that you want us to talk about, just send us a message on either of those platforms, or you can comment here on this thread, and we will take it into consideration. So, well, let's start with overall impressions of the shows. Caleb, let's have you go first. What did you think of it? Because you just watched it and only saw it one time, right?
Are you sure you want me to go first?
Yeah, let's just dive in. It's all right.
It was okay. It's pretty good. I was interested in seeing it. Initially, I had some highs and lows during certain episodes and certain arcs. And by the end of it, I was just too exasperated to really enjoy it, to be honest. Lots of great points about it, lots of pretty visuals, lots of great stylish fashion choices and wig choices and head choices in general. But I thought there were a lot of problems with the story, to be honest. I thought that a lot of aspects that they were pushing in the story were really clumsily handled and really inaccurate and unearned, I guess. And I found myself trying to think of reasons to care about what happened to Beth, but all she did the entire story is do whatever she wanted, make horrible choices, no matter what human wreckage she caused. And then every time that she needed somebody to swoop in and save her, somebody swooped in and saved her, all the way up to the very end. And I just didn't really buy it, to be honest. So that could be expanded to much more if we get into it later, but I'm not like sad that I watched it, but man, oh man, 7 hours, huh? All right.
Well, and that's totally fine that you don't like it, just like anyone who's watching this, if you weren't a fan of whatever we're talking about. That's kind of the fun part of these discussions, is to not just throw the show or the movie under the bus, but the point of this is kind of an undertone of media literacy, that I'd rather we dissect what's not working and how you could have done it differently. So I'm glad that you bring that to the table, because I like the show. Do I think it's perfect? No. But I'm really excited to pick apart certain things that you mentioned there as we go through this discussion.
Yeah,
Virginia, what about you? Oops, sorry.
One of my favorite podcasts, one of their classic refrains is, it's okay to like something. If you like it, it's okay that you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, I have a criticism of it, I want to hear what you guys think. That's why we're talking. If we all liked the same things in exactly the same way, I wouldn't be on this thing. That's
Right.
not interesting. So
It wouldn't be fun if we're just like, yay, that was cool. The
or
end.
we were all just like, this sucks.
Right. Constructive criticism is what we're looking for. Virginia, what did you think about the show?
I kind of feel the same. It's hard because I went into it really wanting to like it because it has all of the elements of things I love, like Netflix, boom. period piece, boom. Ill-fitting wigs that make a face really framed awkwardly on the cheekbones, boom, here for it. Yeah, I have to agree with a lot of Caleb's points, and I'll kind of yes and a lot of what I didn't buy, which was more of just I did not feel connected to really any of the acting that was taking place. And by that I mean it felt like acting. I think that there's a part of and I don't want to use the words good or bad, right? Because this is all, like we said, it's all of our personal taste and experience. And for me, when I can get immersed into a show or a film that I think does it successfully, I forget that they're acting. Even with, my current favorite show, The Crown, I know that those are not really Princess Diana and Prince Charles, right? But
wait, what? It's
that's
not.
it's not a biography. What? It's not a doc. But there's a part of that, right? That suspension of disbelief where I believe this portrayal of this person, so that this version of this character of Charles, who is based on a real person, is someone that I'm connecting with. Even if he's not obviously the real person, I'm connected to his story. I'm connected to his journey. And kind of similarly to Caleb, I was like waiting for an episode where I would feel connected to Beth. And I don't even know if it's necessarily because she just continually made bad choices, because I think we've seen characters that are anti-heroes done very successfully, right? Like Breaking Bad is one of the most popular television shows that's ever come out. Mm-hmm. And Walter White is the villain. We are watching a hero become a villain. That's the entire, crux of that show, is the scenes where he is slowly losing his humanity, and it's bit by bit, chipped away. But you still sort of, even in the end scenes and even in the final, spoiler alert for a show that's been over for years now, but even in the final scene where he's kind of in the lab and the cops are coming and he's kind of dying, or we're led to believe that he's dying finally and succumb, there's still an element, at least for me, of connection to that character of, at the very least, I feel some sort of way that is like, okay, he kind of accomplished what he wanted to do, which was, take care of his family to a degree and then make his mark. He was someone who felt unseen, and now he was seen, right? And so I kept waiting for these moments with Beth. I kept waiting for not only a connection to what she felt like Chess was maybe bringing to her life that she was missing. And I think that there were times where narratively they were trying to connect her mom's absence, even when she was physically there was always kind of that worry that, is she diving underwater for the last time? Like they were trying to build that sort of connection. And every time, I have to be honest, for me, it just fell flat. I did not connect. And I was saying before we hopped on, like the character that I felt the most genuine connection with was in like one scene, and he was the older chess player that she ended up playing in the final episode in Russia. That was basically like her semifinal match, and he had like the Einstein hair happening, lots of head choices, as Caleb mentioned, wigs and hats and mustaches that should not have been there. But I connected more with that older, not unnamed character, but so minimal that I can't even remember his character's name. I felt more genuine connection with him and his limited screen time than I really did with Beth the entire time. And I think I watched a couple episodes with my husband, who's also a writer. So filmmakers and writers watching stuff together oftentimes is like super fun. But then when you don't like something, it's fun in a different way, because they're just like, I would have done that, And he pointed out something that I thought was really astute, which is just like, all of the dialogue was like on the nose. Like everything was on the nose. Like, dear, go get my medication from the doctor, my tranquility medicine. I'm in need of some tranquility right now. I'm trying to remember exact. Even one time when they were in Mexico City, her mom comes in and she goes, "Don't worry about it. You can turn the light on. I'm now awake." And I was like, okay, no one speaks like that, not even in the 1960s, but okay. So there was just an element of all of those, they're technical elements, but they're the creative elements, right, that would lead to the believability and the buy-in, right? And to Caleb's point, the technical, the lighting, the costuming, the makeup, again, the nail choices of having her fingernails be unpainted. She looked, I will say, it's Nosferatu fingers. I think she was meant to look scary, to kind of look intimidating, to as she was kind of coming into her own more. But I don't know. There was no point where I was like, yeah, you were wronged, Beth. And now that it was just like, yeah, savior after savior, hero after hero, you know, digging her out of the holes that she's, or, you know, filling in the holes, I guess, that she's dug herself to help her climb out. And so I just, by the end of it, I was like, good for you. Like, I didn't really, there was no emotional crux to her winning. Spoiler alert, we said that already. You know, again, I felt more connected to her playing with those old men in the park than any of the other journeys. So there's just, I think there was something in it for me that felt like a coloring book that did not have any shading filled in. Like, the outline was there. I knew what it was and what the picture was, but there was no dimension to what I was watching, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big thing that we're getting at here is issues with the characters. And I just want to say, Alma, the mom, let me see if I got a picture
That's
of
Emily
her.
Heller's sister in real life. Wonderful comedian Emily Heller. That's Marielle Heller, I think is her name.
Mm-hmm.
I love her so much. She was maybe my favorite character in the show. And I gotta say, I liked her dialogue, but it might be because it was reminiscent of Moira from Schitt's Creek. Just in her very dramatic, almost Shakespearean prose and the way that she delivered it. But I think you've got some legitimate points, and you mentioned the Russian chess player at the end with what she's got 3 guys that she's got to battle, or 2, and then the main guy. And I think the reason why his character works and why we like quickly attach to him is because he's got a really solid arc, and he does like a flip because he's the Russian guy, so we assume that he's evil and they're all plotting against her and blah, blah, blah. He's the enemy. But then for him to arc and flip to I think I just played the best chess player ever, then you see a change in his character. Mm-hmm. And I think the point that you guys are both kind of making here is her character doesn't exactly arc and maybe is not a super well-developed character. And I think that does have a really big impact on the story. I think structurally it was pretty all right. It probably could have used a little more conflict or higher stakes at points, but I think the big problem is her character. And I stumbled upon some notes about when you're writing a character and you want to make them empathetic, especially your protagonist. So some of the points on that are allow them to fail, put them in danger, give them a unique talent, show their care for others, treat them unjustly, have them experience loss, and let them be the underdog. And I think they do hit on a handful of these things, but there are some that just kind of fall flat. She is sort of an underdog. I mean, she's an orphan and had a rough upbringing, but she's also she's a child prodigy with chess. She's amazing and brilliant and beautiful, So it doesn't really feel like she's an underdog because as you both mentioned, not only do you have some kind of savior coming in and cleaning up the mess or guiding her in the right direction, but she's also handed a lot of solid opportunities like inheriting the house, and she doesn't seem to have a big issue with money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there were so many points, and it became so repetitive to me of, okay, so she starts out and she's a prodigy because when Mr. Scheibel starts to teach her chess in the basement of the school, it almost seems like she kind of gets it like immediately. Like he teaches her things, but she kind of understands like right off the bat, like what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he trains her, and then she's really good, and then she's really good, and then she's really good. And then, it's like, what would have happened if Benny didn't say, come and stay with me in New York, and I'll train you for a month or however long they spent doing that, making her even better. I guess that was her putting in the work, but it was also somebody swooping in and saying, here's a free place to stay. Here's me taking care of you. You don't have to, pay anything, do anything. I'm just training you out of the kindness of my heart or my love for the sport.
Well, the guy that played Dudley in Harry Potter, I can't remember his character's name, but that is grown-up Dudley is Beltic.
I thought he was great.
He came to her house. He was great too.
He was basically like, hey, I need a human companion. And then when I'm done with you, I'm done with you. And she didn't even have to say it. He was already packed and ready to go. And he was like, you're done with me. I get it.
Which, to quote Amy Poehler when she hosted the Golden Globes, I do appreciate British people playing Americans because we cannot tell that they are British when they are speaking in our movie parts. Both him and the guy that played Indiana Jones, what's his name? Benny the pirate. I did appreciate that line in the script. At one point she was like, and I'm gonna beat that pirate, and I was like, okay, at least we are acknowledging within the storyline that he looks cuckoo bird because he's carrying a knife, he's wearing this hat, he looks like Crocodile Dundee. I don't understand why. It's never really explained either. And then he just kind of is like, what is happening? They're indoors. You are inside, sir. What are you doing?
But isn't he sort of like the precursor to a lot of the cool poker champ guys nowadays? Like
totally
have their like outfit and everything. That's what I saw. You reminded me of something though just now.
I'm sorry. I just look at his little mustache. I keep laughing because that's the kid from Love Actually. This is how I'm referencing everything in this movie. That's the little boy from Love Actually.
See, I thought of him from Game of Thrones, but he carries that knife, and she specifically asks about the knife once, right? So I thought, okay, isn't it a story Bible verse rule that if you mention a weapon or you mention something that has the potential to be a weapon, it has to show up later?
Yeah. Like if you have a gun in Act 1, it better show up by Act 3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened with the knife.
He didn't even cut an apple with it. There was not even anything.
It was never unsheathed. You have to do that. That's basic stuff. I'm not even a writer, and I know that.
I took it more as the flexing, like you said, the poker tournament, the guys that have like the polarized lenses on and all that.
Yeah.
Just a major flex. But you're right. He had a weapon. He should have unsheathed it, I don't know, dropped into the Russian tournament. And
it would have been fine if they hadn't had that scene where she asked him about it and they show a close-up of it and he says it's for protection against whatever. But then it never comes out that, he had this really traumatic, hurtful experience early in life, and that makes him feel like, he can protect. Nothing.
I would have even had a buy-in of at some point, some chess players that are angrily looking at her while she's exiting the dorm, are try to, beat her up or something. And then he comes in with the knife to protect her. I would have even bought in something like that because it would have done what Sarah said, and mentioned, which was sort of put her in danger, because there were also, for as much as there was tragedy in her life and, she was kind of a little bit bullied by those girls in the school, but not really, I kept expecting there to be more, and she goes to the sorority thing and I was like, oh, great. This is gonna be a Carrie situation. It's going to make her more motivated. Nothing. She just takes a bottle and leaves,
Yeah.
Kind of everything that you think might set up some sort of turn to build character kind of just veered the other way, and we saw someone who just continuously chose to be alone. And then they kind of built that in with the narrative of the mom and the flashbacks of, the strongest people know how to be alone, etc. But there were never any consequences, not the right word I'm looking for. There were never really, there weren't really any major consequences, but also there was never really any heightened states where she had to sort of learn how to protect herself. It was always just, I'm going to do this by being alone. I'm going to steal the dad's bottle of booze and go back to my house, So it felt like you said, Kid, but it felt repetitive in that way, because I kept thinking we were coming up to the top of like a roller coaster, and then maybe something would hit, and then we would just be up there. And then another scene.
Up a little bit more, and then slowly glide down to the end.
Calmly glide down as if it was like a kid's ride at Disney World. It was interesting because all of those elements of there being true struggle were there. They just, for me, never connected with the story and the character of Beth. I felt more struggle from the mother character, which, to your point before, Sarah, I wanted to say, maybe that's what it is that she did kind of talk like Moira Rose, but Moira Rose is a comedic character. Like,
right.
Intentionally.
She was a caricature.
Like, yes, we know to laugh at her when she says these things. And so it's like, it almost felt cruel to sort of laugh at this woman who had just been left by her husband. And she, was pretty good at piano, but was like kind of bummed out and never really wanted to play piano, like to kind of ever take her at anything other than face value, I felt like would have been a disservice to her. And it was interesting because she also was very up and down, right? Like, you wanted to root for her, but then she would just like go off with that dude and not go to like Beth's chess matches or whatever. And you're just like, come on, what are you doing? Like, it was weird. It's like I didn't connect other than Harry, aka Dudley. I didn't really connect with anybody. And he was the one that at the end was like working at a grocery store and was like cool enough to be like, yeah, and I like it. It's a good job and the people are nice and I'm also in college. So what are you doing? Like that, to me, it was actually probably my favorite scene, or one of my favorite scenes, because it was him being like, yeah, that's what I do. Like, he didn't allow her to like bully him for something that was an appearance-based thing,
You just brought up another plot point that I don't even have in my notes here. The whole thing with the mom and the guy, the pen pal.
It goes nowhere. Nothing happens.
For what reason is that included in the show? She tells Beth on the plane, oh, by the way, I had this pen pal for years, and we're going to meet him at the airport. And then, like, it seems like maybe a week or so, they're kind of inseparable. And then he takes off, and she's kind of sad, and then life just goes on. Am I forgetting a pivotal scene?
Were we supposed to understand that he gave her hepatitis, or that she had been suffering from it for a while?
She'd been suffering because they mentioned her bouts of illnesses previously.
Yeah.
She's always kind of sick.
Well, and he abandons her at the end. He leaves. So
So does that just further cement in Beth's mind, like, don't trust anyone? Don't, like, give yourself over to anyone? Like, even more of that? Or...
No, I didn't take it as that. I took it as more of like a B or a C story with Alma, that her character arc is about confidence, because she's so low in the beginning and with her husband and all that. But then once he's gone and she can, be the I don't know, the mom that she always wanted to be but was kind of held back from being because of him, you see her really sparkle, that she's like, all right, yes, my adopted daughter has a talent and we're going to go for it. Hell yeah, I'm going to help you figure it all out, and we're going to travel and we're going to make it happen. So I just saw it as like another step, but with that high, you come down off of it like, okay, it didn't pan out, and you have those ups and downs in any journey. But does it fall a little flat? Sure. But I think the fact that she does overcome some odds, and she seemed at a unfixable level of depression when the husband was around, and then we see her turn around and really thrive as this mom manager. I think that's why she's even more of a lovable character than Beth's character, because you don't really have anything there,
Yeah, I would agree. And you kind of see her at one point after the guy leaves to go to Oaxaca, which is, I love it anytime somebody says that, because it's like always in like rap songs and stuff. But she's playing piano in the lobby of the hotel, and she's enjoying it, and she's enjoying the attention that people are, giving her. And I appreciated that there seems to be a bit of an arc where she did gain that level of confidence to, I think Beth even says something about so much for stage fright or something, you know, and
Mhm.
she, you know, so there was an element to where you could see that she was a bit more confident, and that was nice to see.
Yeah. We just got a comment here from Mary that I want to bring up because I think it's an interesting point. Did the show actually address the notion that chess was a game for men? And in Mary's experience, that was the response that she got when asked about, or when she was asking about playing it. From what I remember, it wasn't overtly discussed as like, oh no, Beth, you can't join. It's a man's game, except for when she signs up for one of the first games and she's surrounded by men. But there's one other girl, maybe another one. What do you guys think about that? Do you think it's problematic that we just kind of brush it over, that women were kind of nudged out of that world until later?
Well, I don't think it's explored very well. I mean, it's implied. It almost seems like the show wants to coast along on us, the audience, taking for granted that the audience knows like that it's a men's game and that it's unusual for this young woman. But I also found in some research that I did that it wasn't as if this didn't happen. There were several very, very famous, maybe not like world champion, but international champion chess players that were women throughout the 70s. And I got to do a little bit more research on that. But I they sort of made it seem like, wow, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened, a woman in our midst. And I think that it was commented on by a few female chess players who said like, well, that's some nice revisionist history on your part, but we were there, Yeah, it was tough, but everything was tough for women back then.
I think maybe that's kind of where I fall with it too, is like, that weirdly didn't bother me because it was there and I knew that undertone was there. But like Caleb said, it's like, okay, cool. It was 1960s America. Like, when has it not been difficult for, and to be fair, she was a white woman, right? So the discrepancies and disparities that we did see were in kind of relation to her adopted sister from the orphanage, and sort of more was explored in that way, and the use of tokenism in terms of her character within her position at the law firm that she worked at. I think that, at least for me, I went into it just being like, oh, cool. The 1960s was pretty much terrible for all women, especially women of color. It was nice almost to not have that be a thing that kept getting hammered. And I almost wonder if the scene with the Time magazine, where they were like with her in her bedroom, and then later they're reading the article and stuff, and she says, I don't even really want to read it anymore. They're just talking about how the thing that's interesting is that I'm a girl, and she rightfully didn't think that was anything that was interesting about her. That was just a fact, So I almost took that as the position that the show took on it. Was, yes, I'm sure that there were struggles, and yes, there was disparity, and I'm sure honestly she probably dealt with more harassment than we would have seen. But that's the thing, is they didn't really show any of that, and so
Right.
it felt like that entire part of it was removed from the story, almost maybe to just show someone who is dealing with alcohol and drug dependency in a way that kind of highlights that can affect anyone regardless of circumstance or, socioeconomic space as well. Because we found out later that, her mom they weren't poor, they weren't, her mom, they give you the briefest glimpse. Her mom was like a mathematician, and also a genius, because she was like burning those books at one point, so it was interesting, I guess, to omit it, but I just, at this point, I assume if I'm watching anything ever for women, it's probably going to be pretty difficult.
Yeah.
How are we going to explore this?
It was definitely glossed over and a bit of a missed opportunity. Let me ask the two women in the room and the many women watching at home. Something that I had an issue with is this point where she's a prodigy. She's naturally good anyway. But time and time again, the men in her life have to come in and focus her and help her train and help her practice and all this, doesn't that take a lot of the ultimate power and victory away from her? Because if it would have been up to her, she wouldn't have made it. Like, I really took for a show that advertises a strong central female character who's beating these men at this game, she got so much help from the men along the way that I felt like the whole message was just kind of thrown in the trash.
Yeah,
Like
I
at
can
no
see
point
that.
did I feel like her gifts and her sacrifice, which she made no sacrifices, were the things that helped her win. It was all these people bailing her out along the way. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, honestly.
I
but
don't
that's
think
what I'm
you're
wondering.
missing anything, but I also think that, to quote Amy Poehler in a different context, as Leslie Knope, she famously said in Parks and Recreation, no one achieves anything alone. So I think there's an element to any sort of lasting success where there's a team behind you, right? There's a group of people who believe in you enough. They believe in your talent enough. They believe in your energy, whatever, enough that they're willing to come behind you and support you. To be fair, I don't particularly think any of the characters in this show sacrificed anything ever. There was no stakes really ever for anyone. So it's not like these men came behind her and laid it all down for her, for her to step over them on the proverbial puddle in the road, right? Like Beltic came and stayed for free at her house. The other guy, Indiana Jones Jr., let her sleep on an air mattress in his basement apartment in New York. Yes, they helped her become better at chess, but I also think, at least my take of it was that because they enjoyed chess, the element of their relationship that was most developed with Beth was around chess, and it kind of is mirrored because when she first sleeps with Beltic, she just wants to kind of be like not really talking to him or whatever, and then he's the one that leaves. And then later when she sleeps with, I keep forgetting, Benny, thank you, sorry. I don't know why, I keep just seeing a hat. When she sleeps with Benny, he wants to just talk about chess afterward, and then she kind of is like, all right, good night. So there's no real major sacrifice made on anyone's part at all in this series. And so I get what you're saying, but I also feel like I didn't necessarily have that takeaway because I just felt like that was the sport that she was playing, largely male dominated. The relationships with the women in her life she had were fractured, so she wouldn't have had the inclination to go to them for help. And they also have shown that they don't have a proclivity or really attention span for chess. Her mom, her adopted mother, she tried to be interested. She tried to be like, tell me about all the moves, but she didn't really know. Like, these women in her life were not interested in it and didn't know. So I think for me, what I took it as was her finding her people where they were, and they just happened to be men, because of the way that the sport had been skewed, and she didn't come up in women's leagues, and there wasn't a women's all of the things that she just kind of was by default surrounded by men who, if anything, I think really only sacrificed a little bit of their time and their energy doing something that they already liked to do. They all liked talking about chess and thinking about chess and being about chess. So part of me also was like, who wouldn't want to kind of attach themselves to this prodigy that's probably going to be a world champion? Who wouldn't want to be able to say, yes, and I, Harry Beltic, was there with Benny Indiana Jones, and we all were there on the phone with her, and we helped her win. I'm sure that there were, stories of that in bars for years to come for those characters. So it for me didn't feel like it took away from anything. It just felt kind of like the cards, the way that the show kind of laid them out. I don't know, Sarah, what do you think?
I guess I just wonder was there any point in the story where, as a woman, you felt like, hell yeah, women, this woman's doing it. I feel good about
No,
this.
she was such a bummer. No, everybody was a bummer though. I in general was not gendered to be like, and men or women. I was just kind of like, everyone's depressed. Like I just, there wasn't really, and again, maybe it goes back to not tying or feeling connected to any particular character. That was probably a byproduct of that, right? Like I didn't really feel those wins for her, much like I didn't feel the losses for anyone else,
Right. Well, I just think that a lot of modern entertainment, especially written by men, coasts along very easily on well, it's enough that she showed up and that she had the courage to do this thing with men or against men. It's like, well, is that enough? Or should we explore that story more? I feel like that's such an easy, from a writer's perspective, just such an easy thing to like, oh yeah, she's a woman. Imagine that. We need more.
What do you think, Sarah?
When Caleb first brought up the point of it not being heavily focused on her being a woman in a man's world, I think at first thought I kind of wonder if it would have been a stronger story if that were more highlighted, but would that just be more cliche? I'm not sure. Although I think if that were a prominent part of the story, I wonder if the stakes could have been higher in that she is doing this for all women chess players. You know what I mean? So that if she loses, if she's defeated by a man, if she needs a man's help, that those are high stakes, that she needs to show that she can do it by herself or teaming up with another woman. I think had it been like that and they played out the story in that direction, it would have worked. But I think I'm on the same page as Virginia of I never felt like yay women, except when Alma got like super excited about the possibilities for them of like, oh, and I calculated if we have these winnings, then we can do this. And how about I'll be your accountant manager? And it was like, all right, yeah, okay, a mother-daughter duo. This is going to be great. I'm really excited for that. And it worked, but then it did kind of fizzle out, especially when they got to Mexico City. So that's kind of where I lost that. But as far as her like winning any of the games, that kind of stuff, it never felt like, yay, women. It just felt like in the same tone of, again, what Virginia said with the guys helping her. It's not so much here's a man helping a woman. It was here's a bunch of chess nerds helping each other. Mm-hmm. That's how it came across. So, and I think that's because they didn't explicitly highlight like this is a woman in a man's world and drive that home.
And I read a few reviews that pointed out the subversion of some of the tropes in this show, that being one of them, where, okay, it's a show about this where I expect to see a lot of women versus men in the 60s that we've seen a lot in other shows and films and things, but or like it goes along with the subversion of tropes of like her in the orphanage. Oh, the creepy old guy is gonna molest her. Well, he didn't. He honestly just liked playing chess with her. Oh, the headmistress is gonna be horrible and is gonna beat her with a cane. Never happened. Her adoptive mother is gonna be terrible to her. No, not. There were plenty of points where the subversion of the narrative was definitely done on purpose, but I'm just not sure if that really resulted in much substance for me.
That point, though, of subverting our expectations of an American show that usually is like something terrible is going to happen. This is a setup for a really bad payoff. I wonder if that's part of the reason why this show was so popular, in the same vein of the Great British Baking Show. And I feel like there was something else that we talked. Oh, probably Schitt's Creek. Although that's a Canadian show, so I guess that doesn't quite count. But I wonder if that's part of why it was, a different level of escapism for people, especially watching it in 2020, is that it wasn't really exhausting to watch. You're not seeing her crash into super, super lows. Like, yeah, she was dealing with addiction and substance abuse and overcoming adversity in many ways, but it wasn't what we were expecting could potentially happen to, a young, good-looking woman or an orphan or adopted, any of those scenarios that you mentioned. So I think that could be part of it. I think if this show had come out in 2019 or several years from now when we're not dealing with a very tumultuous time, as it were, I don't know that it would resonate as strongly or be as appealing. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the escapism of it hit at a really good point late last year. It came out late last year, October, November.
I don't know. Last year was like 2 weeks long and also 5 years long.
I think it was, like fall of last year.
Yeah. So, I think people want that, and they want the sumptuous visuals. And I think that we're still living in a very post-Mad Men world, especially with 20s, people in their 20s and 30s really gravitate toward that era of style. And, it's funny because I felt a lot of similar things about this that I did about Ratched when we talked about that. And that is, as far as a thing to look at, my God, beautiful. But as a thing that I'll ever think about again, or that really spurred me on to do some research or think about something or emotionally touched me, I didn't get that. So
I do absolutely love the production design and the art direction and a lot of the costuming for the show. But I feel like it kind of fizzled out maybe by halfway. It wasn't quite as striking as this is, maybe like episode 2 or something, maybe 3, where we get that. And then what was even the way that they kind of set this up and just the cinematic choices for the first handful of episodes is just beautiful. And I think the reference to, oh my God, I was going to say Mad Men, although maybe Mad Max Fury Road, I don't know. Yeah, it's very beautiful. I wonder what the show would have been like if we would have leaned into this aesthetic much more, kind of like Ratched did, but, sort of that like Tim Burton, Edward Scissorhands-esque vibe. I wonder if they would have leaned heavily.
I actually kind of have a theory about the visuals in that way. I think it's coupled with her hairstyle changing too. I think the more she got into adulthood, the less vibrant everything became. Her hair kind of shifted into something more cosmopolitan because the first few episodes, I think she was very much still that girl that we met in the first episode, right? The wig, that wig stays the same, right? And eventually she starts to flip it out a little bit. She starts to get it away from those cheekbones. She starts to kind of do a little bit more, yes, look at these finger waves. Even this one over here on screen left with the kind of brown coat is like, it's almost the exact same length of hair. It's just styled differently. And so I think what I kind of took away was that, for the first few episodes, she's still very much that girl that was in the orphanage, kind of stunted in that way. And then the more she comes into her adulthood and femininity and personhood as a woman who has a sense of style outside of, what Alma brought her to the second floor discount, racks to get, things became more fitted, but they also were more muted, and so my theory behind all of that is it kind of mirrored maybe how she was navigating the world. And we saw something that was a lot brighter and more vibrant that kind of echoed her innocence. And I just mean her naivety. I don't know how to say that word.
Either one's fun.
Great. I'm French. Naivete.
Aren't we all?
But then the older she got, right, the more experienced she became, the more in touch with who she was, however detached from the world that is. I felt like things became a bit more muted. But her hair got a lot better. So really 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But that was my theory on that.
That's really fascinating. I didn't think about it, and I know you wanted to talk about her wigs. And I
it was
curious.
The perfect inroad to talk about that wig because we're getting done early tonight, but I could talk extensively for the
Really?
next 45 minutes about that wig.
The
Because
first one, you mean?
the first one, it is just really
Tell us about it.
as if Caleb did say it, it's the head choices that this show makes. That wig is so bad. I cannot. And again, I think it was probably intentional because it was that same exact hairstyle that she had the day that her mom died in that car crash, right? The same super short bangs and short here, and it's kind of flipped in, and it does not suit her well. And her eyes as a human are set a little bit farther apart. That's just Anna Taylor-Joy's face. Did I say her name right? I don't know anyone's name in this show. But
Well, I was going to say
know.
that's the evolution. I feel like with her eyes, with her obvious feature being her eyes being so far set apart, that first wig points to them and like pulls this area out more. And as she grows up and comes more into her own, the hair goes down, she gets sleeker, and she becomes less alien looking.
Exactly.
And I mean
exactly
alien in a
what it
very
is.
good way, in case she's listening.
Yeah, I don't. She is a gorgeous person. That's no, and again, traditional beauty standards are not the mark of anyone's worth in general. So that statement is also just a statement. Like she is, to a degree, extremely conventionally attractive, but the way that her face kind of feels a bit different from other faces, I think, like you said, Caleb, I think the older she gets, the more progressed we get in the series. She kind of, loosens up those curlers and just kind of lets it flow away, and a bit more natural, right? Like that was a very structured haircut, very structured style that I imagine was easy to upkeep, but also probably made her feel a connection to the person that she was when she was younger. And I can imagine that growing up in a situation where you're constantly in flux, it would feel nice to have something that felt like a continuity for yourself. So I understood the style choices, but wow, that was the wig that they used in a lot of promos. And, there were better wigs, is all I'm saying. There were better wigs as they went along. And I liked her French wig. I liked this little finger waves wig. I liked there were better ones. The one in the middle. Oh,
Yeah, I love
wonderful.
That
Should have been the promo one. You know what I mean? Like, so it was just interesting that the one that they really hammered home in terms of like, this is who this person is, was just so unflattering, and they stuck with it for a while. And then the choice to have a hat, I can't even get into that. I can guarantee that there were so many arguments between the costume designer and probably the showrunner about whether or not they were going to have that hat. That is not a hat that came without conversation. That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't know who.
Sorry, I didn't get a picture of the hat.
It's fine. I think there's one still where he's like playing her with the background, the chest.
You're talking about Benny's hat?
Benny's hat. Why does he have it?
Okay.
Why is he wearing it? Yeah,
that's just his costume, man. He's committed to the bit.
Right. The bit of being an Indiana Jones cosplayer, I understand. But again, that was not a hat. That was not a wardrobe choice that came without many conversations. That's all I'm saying. I don't know who fell where, but I can guarantee you that hours and hours were spent on the size of that brim. Is that jacket going to be leather? Is the length going to be a little bit too long for indoor use? Do you know what I mean? All of those questions were just notes on a board that somebody had to keep going back to, and they'd go home at night and they would say, we lengthened the coat by 3 inches, so now it hits him in right below the knees.
Maybe those were hours that could have been better spent tightening up the story.
This is what I'm saying.
Just a suggestion. I don't know.
So I would eventually love to hear from the costume designer just about the discussions and the decision to go with that particular character's costuming, because everything head to toe, T to B, was a choice.
His necklaces, his multiple long necklaces.
like, what is happening? His deep V, like she called
Deep
it
V,
right.
yeah.
As a pirate, he truly looks like just. And again, I think your point is well made, of like a precursor to like a poker guy. He reminded me of dudes that I would see in college that would be dressed like anime characters,
Mhm.
but just like to go to class, you
Yeah.
know, because that was the choice that they were making sartorially, and I respected it, but I also never understood it. So I think that that was just him being like, this is who I am, this is who I'm going to be. Because if you notice, when they get to his apartment in New York, he's just a dude wearing a t-shirt. He doesn't feel the need to
And he
put
takes the head
on
off
all
too.
the accessories. Yeah,
Yep.
he doesn't need to have all that on. He doesn't have his like Crocodile Dundee accoutrement to sort of like make him feel, you know what I mean? And so once we got to that Benny, where he was just kind of like a dude in a t-shirt, and you know what I mean, like wearing regular clothes, I was like, okay, I buy him now as a character that's more realistic. So it was just, oh, it was a lot, you guys, a lot of head stuff, a lot of head choices.
Sure.
But I loved Harry Beltic. I thought he was great. I think he's my
Yeah.
favorite character.
He was one of my favorites for sure. He felt like a real human being.
Yes, and even with his little teeth and getting fixed and
Yeah.
stuff, and good for Dudley for like having a glow up moment, because you know he did not look like that when he was in Harry Potter, and you know he dressed fairly normally, you know, but he wasn't particularly stylish. Like I bought him as a character. I bought him as like a three-dimensional person, whereas like Benny was just, I felt like he was the guy that was just always performing, always on. And that just felt exhausting because we never really saw him not that way until later, you know, in his apartment. So,
Did you guys half expect Beltic to come back in the last episode and like have turned insane and like try to shoot her or something? I don't know why. I half expected like he shows up. She's doing that interview at the school and she's got all the mod makeup on.
yeah.
And she's all messed up. And he shows up outside when she goes outside for a smoke. I honestly thought he was going to pull out a gun. I don't know why.
But I think
that's the expectation.
right, it's going back to the concept that this show doesn't have any of those extreme situations like American cinema tends to have. So we're expecting something wild to happen, and I guess the wildest thing was hats and wigs. Although I have a much better appreciation for both Benny's hat and overall cosplay situation, as well as her wigs, just because I think they both really beautifully parallel the character change, even though we've critiqued that her character doesn't arc very well, and Benny's sort of, I guess, you know. But to see them kind of like both let down their guard or let down their wig or let down their hat, you know what I mean? I think it's really neat that there's subtle nods to the character development, even in costuming.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
So we were talking about how the show is set in a time where it would make sense to make the concept of her being, you know, a woman in a man's world, playing a man's game kind of thing, and how that could have been like a theme to the show. And they didn't do that. So it kind of makes me wonder, what if this story was taking place now, or something more modern, or, you know, a different time period? I don't know. Do you think there's any benefit of it being a period piece show? Any like pros or cons to that?
Well, I think selling it, like I said previously, selling it to the Mad Men generation, I just think it's infinitely easier to sell something right now to people if it's set in the 50s and 60s or maybe in the 80s. Although then I was thinking about that too, because the source material is a novel that came out in 1983. And obviously in the novel, it's also set in the same time period. But I wonder if they would have transposed the narrative to an 80s, an early 80s setting when the novel came out, what that would have done for it. But I think what they're trying to play off of most is the Cold War tensions between the U.S. and USSR in that time. You know, and this is the same it's just a few years later that you've got Bobby Fischer winning the World Chess Championship, defeating Boris Spassky this is in 1972, and that was marketed as USSR, let's get it on, this is Rocky versus Drago, the origin, and that's a thing that really happened. So I think that was both the original novels kind of inspiration for this, and then the shows as well. So I think if you moved it to a different era, you would sort of lose that element. Maybe not necessarily in the early 80s, but there was still a lot of that swirling around in that early 80s time period. But
well, I think too, anytime you make something a period piece, anytime you're looking back on something and talking about history, you know what you're gonna say, right? You know what's gonna happen.
Like it almost writes itself.
Yeah, well, you know what's gonna happen on the world stage, so it does give you license in a way to. We keep going back to a comparison to Mad Men, right? The backdrop of the 1950s and 1960s in Mad Men, knowing what happens on that larger stage allows for the flourishing of interpersonal characters to where you care about somebody who's as jerky as Don Draper and you want him to kind of succeed. And then, spoiler alert, again, for a show that has been over for years, but
we are spoiling everything.
I know, just everything.
I've never watched every show from the last 20 years.
But the final scene of that show is him sitting on that cliffside meditating, and then he thinks of the the takeaway that the audience is supposed to take is that he thinks of the "I want to buy the world a Coke" commercial that was super ubiquitous, and people, even if they hadn't seen it, have a reference point for it to a degree, right? So I think when you have a backdrop of familiarity and history, it allows you, if you do it right, to really give characters a chance to flourish and interpersonal relationships to flourish and foibles and mistakes and things like that to build seasons at a time to where, the person that Don Draper was at the end of the series, right before that last turn, was a completely different person than who we met in the first bar scene in season 1, smoking and talking to cocktail waiters and writing on little napkins and stuff, so there's an element, I think, of it writes itself. You don't have to necessarily give all of this backstory, because if they just say on the phone, when she's on the phone with the State Department, oh, well, we're going to have one of our people go with you for protection. They don't need to say anything else, because what they're kind of getting at, what they're talking about, when she says I think I might start studying Russian at night, yes, it was because she wanted to eventually go to Russia to play chess, but also because that was an imminent worry and threat. So there was so much that was able to go unsaid, because it was, what you're going to say, what that is, that I hate to say it, but in a better written show could have allowed for more of a depth of character development than what we got, because so much of that other wouldn't have needed to be mined. You would have been able to just let it be the Game of Thrones backdrop that it is. What all the rays are, you don't need to go into all of it. But I just think it missed the mark, because it didn't take that opportunity and flesh out as much as it could, in my opinion. Again, if you like the show, tell us we're wrong, because hey, we're wrong. That's fine. We're just some people with some opinions. That's all. Let us know, because if you really feel like we missed it, or it didn't resonate and we missed it in some way, please, because I would love to be proven wrong on this show, because it does have all of these elements that in theory would make it work, but I don't know, it was like flat soda.
Yeah, I think the main thing is when you do a period piece, especially in this era, it's just a guaranteed dopamine hit for the audience, where they go, ooh, stylish, escape. It's so different than modern day. Everything now is so ugly, and everything was so luscious and that just, which is fine. But I feel like it's so much harder to write something that's set in the present day. Not that I don't know what we're talking about exactly, because not that this show should have done that. I just think it's an interesting exercise to think, what if it were to have brought it up to modern day?
She'd be wearing the exact same pants and t-shirt combo she was wearing at one point in her house, because
That's
I was
true.
like, I have that outfit. So fashion is cyclical. Style-wise, probably would have seen some similar pieces.
Yeah, agreed.
I think the other thing too is when you're doing a period piece and assuming that you're historically accurate or historically appropriate, and like a nonfiction world, we'll say, the rules of the world are already established. So I think that's what Virginia's getting at, is that because you already have the structure of that society and culture and expectations and, all that stuff is already out there, that you don't have to explain the world aside from like, here's your Norman Rockwell photo, that's where we are.
Right.
Then yeah, you have much more flexibility to put the work into character development and letting them kind of explore that world instead of wasting a lot of time on, oh my God, I just blanked on the word. Wow, can't think of it. Explaining the world. I don't know why I'm not thinking of it. Stuff, yeah, the stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been much more challenging if this was a modern story. Plus, when you throw in technology and video games and all that, is chess really going to be as enticing since it's not back in this time when it was a popular game and all of that? I think it would be a much different story.
Oh yeah, I know that there's a huge amount of the chess community that feels like basically computers have ruined the game of chess like forever.
And probably any of those like simple, tangible games. Yeah, not quite the same. Although there was a huge uptick in searches for chess board games and learning about chess and all that after this came out, which is interesting to see the ripple effect that shows can have. I don't know that it would have been quite as popular had we not been dealing with quarantines and being stuck at home and
again,
no
it hits at
movies.
the exact right moment.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, I'm tired of just staring at a screen all day because I work from home and then I watch TV all night. So let's test out that chessboard and let's play it. So I think the timing was really important to this being super successful. But I think
want to see an upcoming Netflix drama about the high stakes world of knitting.
Hey man, why not? It could happen. There's got to be knitting competitions, right?
Oh, I feel like there's
speed knitting.
Speed knitting. I don't know. Let's find out.
Focuses on a young speed knitter who herself is addicted to speed.
Whoa.
The trailer at one point, she's going too fast and she pokes herself with one of the needles and somebody's like, you got to slow down. And she's like, I can't. I never slow down.
I have to go 50 miles per hour or this yarn is going to explode.
It really writes itself, you guys.
Blood intertwined with the fabric there. Yeah.
This is beautiful.
And the show is called Knit One, Purl Two. There you go.
Whoa.
Guys, we did it.
You're welcome.
Oh my gosh.
Netflix, if you're listening, I'm going to you owe us money.
We are available. You can hire us. We are our own writer's table. Well, that actually kind of leads me to what my answer is going to be for this next question, but I'm going to have you guys go first. So after watching this, if anyone liked it or disliked it and you need to steer them in a different direction, what do you recommend that they watch next? Who wants to go first? Not me.
I'll go first.
All right, Caleb, come on down.
Well,
What'd you pick?
I was thinking about sort of a separate point, but I was thinking about what are some other movies and TV and whatever else, what other media, other art that attempts to dramatize very undramatic sports, because that was one of the things going into this show that I thought that I was interested in. It's like, well, how are you going to make watching people play chess interesting? And I would say that that's one of the things that this show really succeeded in. Even though I had no idea what was going on, I don't understand chess. I never have. I never will. there was some. I found some compelling moments in some of the games, which I saw a lot of funny memes about and things like that. But so I was thinking about other movies that I know right off the top of my head that are like undramatic sports movies. So Prefontaine, the 1997 film starring Jared Leto. Steve Prefontaine was a early 70s Olympic long distance runner, and he briefly was sort of a celebrity, mostly for the fact that he was really sort of a very infectious spirit, and people always he sort of popularized running in the 70s, sort of kicked off that boom that we're still operating on today. Before that, nobody really ran. I mean, certainly nobody would be like jogging around the block like you see every single day today. That's a good one. I was thinking about The Color of Money, the Scorsese film from 1986. That's Paul Newman and Tom Cruise. They're pool players. And then I was like, oh yeah, and that is actually a sequel to The Hustler, which is a Paul Newman playing the same character in, I can't remember, 1960 something. Also a pool film with him and Jackie Gleason. And then later, when I was doing research, I realized that Walter Tevis, who wrote The Queen's Gambit in 1983, wrote The Hustler, the book. That was his first novel. And,
wow.
And he wrote The Color of Money. That was his last novel as a sequel to The Hustler. So Tevis did The Hustler, Color of Money, Queen's Gambit, a couple other ones. He also did The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is a very beloved movie of mine. Great Nick Rogue directed film starring David Bowie. If you like Bowie at all and you haven't seen it, that's just weird. You got to see it. It's a trip. It's crazy. My point was, I just thought it was funny that I was doing research for one thing and then realized, like, wait, the same guy wrote another hard to dramatize sports movie. So I also took the opportunity to dive into a musical that I'd always wanted to get into but never really had a reason to. Are you guys familiar with Chess, the musical from 1984?
I've never heard of it.
Never heard of it? Oh, okay. Tim Rice lyrics, Benny and Bjorn from ABBA music. 1984, it was somewhat of a big hit, but it's kind of been forgotten these days. I know there have been several attempts to revive it and make a film adaptation of it that I think even as of 10 years ago they were still working on. I still feel like it'll probably happen, but it is about a Russian chess player and an American chess player set in roughly the same era. And they're sort of playing each other both in the game and for the affections of the same woman. But it's really good. I don't know why I waited this long to get into it. If you like musicals and you've never heard Chess, you're going to love it. It's a straight up, just solid musical. I mean, obviously it sounds like late period ABBA, and Tim Rice's lyrics are great, and I would recommend that. And then film-wise, that has nothing to do with chess, I was thinking about what other films sort of have this icy, verging on sociopathic main character. And I thought of another Anya Taylor-Joy joint, and that's Thoroughbreds from 2017. ATJ and Olivia Cooke are two rich girls who sort of meet up and hatch a plan to murder Cooke's horrible stepfather. And it's a black comedy. Anton Yelchin's final film role, R.I.P. And his role in the movie is actually kind of similar as a character to Benny's in Queen's Gambit, which I was surprised to realize. But Thoroughbreds is a movie that kind of stuck with me. It's kind of just a fun, trashy watch. Contrary to Queen's Gambit, it's only 90 minutes long, so, you know, everybody can chill with that. And I would recommend it.
Well, I know I'm certainly going to check out Chess the Musical because that sounds like a romp. I'm excited for that.
You'll be romping.
Awesome. Those are all very good recommendations. Virginia, what do you have to add to that list?
Obviously, I think I want to talk about the classic high stakes drama about the world of cheerleading, Bring It On. Have
Hell
been sequels.
yes.
Bring It On 2, Bring It On 3. I think there was even a Bring It On 4. Really sheds a light on the represented world of American cheerleading.
Oh, yeah.
Classic performances by Kirsten Dunst, obviously, namely. Great musical dreamscape moments, great costuming. The girl that played the second Slayer on Buffy, I'm blanking on her name, but she was in it. Very good.
Elijah Dushku.
Thank you.
It's like I've seen the movie or something.
Somebody's in the Whedonverse. And then, Swim Fan. Really, all these are just great classic films about things that are kind of boring. Like, who cares about swimming? But if you put a little murderous teenager in there, boom, people care about it. Yeah, I don't know. There was that show Luck that ran for a couple of days on HBO with Dustin Hoffman about horse racing. This is a limited pool that I'm going to have any sort of reference for. I'm not going to be pulling out any sort of like 1960s or like obscure 1980s musicals. Yeah, anything that's like gymnastics or stuff like that is always really fun. But they always tend to be skewed a little bit more towards a comedic realm. I think there was one about like ping pong. There was dodgeball, obviously. I think ping pong was called Balls of Fury. I'm trying to remember and rack my brain. A lot of them were like Will Ferrell or Ben Stiller vehicles.
We got a good related comment that just came through.
Oh,
might be from somebody you know, actually.
Somebody a fun Kirsten Dunst fan?
No,
I think this is a really great comment here. Not sure who Stefan Pell is. It? Does anyone know him? Pele?
I will say that not too long ago, I walked into our shared living room, because this is a comment from my husband, and he was watching ESPN of some sort. I'm saying that because all sports channels are ESPN to me, but it was of some European or British nature. And I asked him if we could turn off, what did I say? I said, can we turn off polo or something like that? And I think I said, can we turn off polo? And he said, yeah, sure. This is cricket. It's just like, they look the same. And I don't understand any of them. But he has been feverishly watching New Zealand play cricket, because they are hours difference from us. So during the daytime they play, so he comes home at night and watches the most boring sport I've ever seen, because it's baseball but worse. So Moneyball, that's a good one. That's a great one, actually, because baseball and the stats of baseball for people who don't care about baseball is super boring. That movie was actually pretty enjoyable in terms of the way that he like moneyballed the game to have a decent team. I'm not very helpful with these recommendations tonight, mostly because I am shockingly not a sports person.
Huge sportsman myself.
See, I know that it looks like I just, I probably love football, basketball, baseball. I had a hard time thinking of a third sport just now. I am not
curling,
Yeah, cricket, polo. It's just right now, all I know is that I've been watching a lot of The Crown, and the character Prince Charles plays polo on a horse, and he has like a little croquet mallet, and I know that they play croquet because of Alice in Wonderland, and their croquet mallets were like the flamingo heads. So really, my sports knowledge is limited. But that being said, go watch Bring It On if you haven't seen it. It's a classic.
Absolutely.
Good choice. So my recommendations are actually movies that got me into an obsession with quirky documentaries and documentaries on just like strange topics. And two of them that like really kicked it off that I think I watched around the same time, probably 2004, 2005, would be Word Wars, which is a documentary about a Scrabble tournament. I love Scrabble. And then the other one is from 2002, Spellbound, which is a riveting story about a spelling bee.
That I've
And
seen. That's a good one. Yeah.
it is super good. There was a new one called Spelling the Dream that just came out last year. It was okay. They spent more time on like getting to know some of the different players and that, not so much on the tournament. So I think the early aught films, Word Wars and Spellbound, are really fascinating. And then, of course, if we're going down the rabbit hole of bizarre competition documentaries, you have to see King of Kong and A Fistful of Quarters. Just so good. So there we go. All right, we've got recommendations out there. We've torn Queen's Gambit apart, but then also, gave some constructive criticisms on how it could have been better or how it would have been different. So hopefully everyone who has watched it and then watched this or listened to it has a better appreciation for the show. And, if anyone has feedback, as Virginia mentioned earlier, let's hear it. You can message us. Again, let me pull up the handles here. If you want to message us via Wealthy Theater or at CinemaLabGR on Facebook or Instagram, feel free and let us know your thoughts on this show. Similarly, if anyone has recommendations for a movie or a TV series that you want to hear us talk about or you want to chime in on, let us know. We're always open to different ideas. We try to pick stuff that's fairly popular, so a lot of people have seen it. But we're always looking for recommendations. So what's coming up next? Normally we do Screen Club as one event and then Cinema Lab as another. Screen Club is on TV and Cinema Lab is movies. What we're going to be doing for this month of January with Cinema Lab is actually the annual Ann Arbor Touring Film Fest. So if you've ever been to it in person, I think it's usually in the spring over in Ann Arbor. It's a really neat experimental film fest. And we have been partnering with the Grand Rapids Public Library to bring the touring version of it to Wealthy Theater every year. I think this is our fourth, maybe fifth year of doing it. So, of course, this year it's going to be a little different. It's going to be virtual. We're still working out some of the details of it, but you will have access to one of the programs that you can stream for free online, thanks to the library. That'll be on January 28th at 7 p.m. We are going to have a panel discussion to analyze the movies that we'll record in this same fashion that you can watch after you screen the movies, or if you just want to check it out later, you can do that. We'll be sure to put it on our podcast page too. So tune in for that, and then after that, we'll be announcing what the February lineup of events is going to be. All right, guys, any last thoughts before we sign off here? Anything else you're itching to get into the conversation?
I didn't even bring up my top 3 gripes with the show, so
Uh-oh. So that's part 2.
Nope.
Queen's
so DM
Gambit part
Caleb if you want to hear all the hot goss.
Slide right in.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be part of this panel and for watching the show. I'm glad that you guys at least didn't hate the experience. If you didn't thoroughly enjoy it, it's okay. I think it's still worth a watch. So until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Later.
Goodbye.